Welcome back to Tech Radar. I'm John McCann and I'm joined by James Peckham, and we're here to talk about Sony, more specifically Sony smartphones. Yes, there is a new flagship on the block from the Japanese manufacturer. May take some of you by surprise, as Sony hasn't been as prolific as other manufacturers in recent years, perhaps in the smartphone market, but it still has an ardent fan base and it still has a lot of good tech in its house. So we're going to explore what is packed into its new phone and whether it's any good. James, kick us off. What is the name of this new phone?
It is the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II. So down on paper, that will look like 1 and then the Roman numeral for 2. Essentially, the thinking behind this is that is a similar naming scheme to what Sony uses for its cameras. So they're trying to emulate that this time. I think that's a little bit confusing for the average person, where they're just a little bit confused why this is a Sony Xperia 1, 2, Sony Xperia 3, like when you see those three numbers laid up against each other when you walk into a shop. But the whole thinking behind it is it's trying to emulate the camera brand a little bit more in that way. And that's just the naming structure they use for that. Whether that's the smart decision here, only time will tell.
Well, you've reviewed the handset, and you can read that full review on techradar.com, obviously. But is photography sort of the main draw of this phone? How is Sony pitching it?
Yeah, photography is probably half of the main draw, I'd say. They essentially want this to be the smartphone for photographers in a way. They want this to be a phone that you have alongside your main camera, or when you just don't have the ability to take your camera out with you. If you are a photographer, they want you to be using this phone, essentially. The other thing is they're trying to just go for people who really want media on their phones, essentially. If you're a mobile gamer, if you're into watching video and films on your phone, a variety of different things like that. And that's why it has a 21:9 aspect ratio display. We'll dive a little bit more into that in a minute, but essentially it just means the display is a little bit more, it is more elongated. So you've got a more widescreen display when you're playing mobile games. That gives you a little bit more view on either side. And then when you're also watching films, it gives you a widescreen aspect ratio. That doesn't always work for every single, because not all content is available in 21:9. For example, this video on YouTube probably won't be available in 21:9. A variety.
Why not? Why not?
Exactly, we have to talk to our people. But for example, I tried to watch Lady Gaga's latest video in 21:9, isn't available, and you think that would be the sort of thing that would be. But then again, a lot of content on Netflix, for example, is available in 21:9. So I was watching Sex Education, the TV show, that did work on this. It's not going to be everything that you're watching.
Okay, cool. So photographers, those who want media on the go, either creating or consuming, could well be a very good phone. Let's take a whip round the various features of the Xperia 1 Mark II. Let's kick off with design. What are we looking at here,
So do you want to see it? There you go. There you can see it.
Yes, it's very black and long.
Yep, you've got the choice of black or purple. I think certain markets, I think in the UK, we're only getting the black variant. So you've got glass on the back there. Again, like I've already spoken about, the 21:9 aspect ratio is the difference compared to every other flagship phone on the market right now. That does make it a little bit difficult to hold in the hand, especially if you do have smaller hands. Even when I'm using it, I'm trying to reach the top of the display, and that's not really possible when you're using one-handed. But you do have a fingerprint scanner on the side, which allows you to unlock the phone.
But not under the screen, which is common.
Yes, not under the screen. So a lot of flagship phones at the moment are moving to in-display fingerprint scanners. OnePlus, Samsung, a variety of other Android manufacturers. Sony have decided to stick with the scanner in the side of the phone. I think that's probably because of I honestly don't know from Sony, but I think that is probably because the design of the phone makes it a little bit harder to reach that part of the screen, that in-display section. But yeah, it does make it not really feel like a flagship feature in that way. I think an in-display fingerprint scanner would have made it feel a little bit more futuristic, even though we're seeing that in a lot of phones right now. The design is largely nice, but it's again what Sony have done before. There's no major changes here. Perhaps the big thing for a lot of people, well, for some people anyway, is the return of the 3.5mm headphone jack. So you are able to use your wired headsets with this phone without using the USB-C port on the bottom. That is a feature that Sony kept for a long time, but then they lost on the Sony Xperia 1. They've decided to bring it back here because they think it's an important feature for audio enthusiasts, for audiophiles, for a variety of different people like that. So actually, this is probably one of the only flagship phones on the market right now you can find with a headphone jack. You can't get that on an iPhone. You can't get that on a variety of Samsung's top-end phones. Yeah, that's a major thing for some people, I think.
So overall design, it's quite long. It is premium. Yeah,
Yeah,
premium enough.
definitely premium. Yeah, it
The
was premium.
fingerprint scanner is handy, but not under the screen, so
Mhm.
that's like departure. And it's got a headphone jack. So a relatively positive start, I'd say. Let's
Yeah.
slide onto that big, wide, handheld landscape 21:9 display. But it's small.
Yeah, so it's 4K. That's probably the big thing here in terms of like no
This
other
isn't the
manufacturer.
first. This isn't the
No,
first 4K phone, though, is it?
no. Sony have done this for I think probably 4 years or so now. They've had a variety of different 4K phones. This is probably the fourth or fifth phone from Sony which has had it. They are still the only manufacturer to offer a 4K phone, which is an interesting element. It does give you an incredible resolution on the screen, but I wouldn't say it's entirely, you only notice it sometimes. Essentially, I wouldn't say in day-to-day usage you would be absolutely blown away by the 4K resolution, but it is genuinely a really genuinely good screen. It's a 6.5-inch display as well, which gives you again a lot of space to be watching everything you want to. If you are looking for a phone that you can watch films on, that you can watch TV shows on, this is a genuinely good choice.
Excellent. That sounds good. And now let's get on to the real central meat of the handset, and that's the
Yeah.
camera.
Sure. So the interesting element here is it's using three 12 megapixel sensors, but something I don't think I've seen on any other flagship phone at the moment. So there's a 12 megapixel wide, a 12 megapixel telephoto, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. And then there's also a time of flight sensor in there as well. Generally, for auto usage, this is better than other Sony phones in the past. I've found that if you are just taking a photo, you're just taking the phone out of your pocket, hitting the shutter straight away. The autofocus on this is genuinely brilliant. There are also a variety of other features that you can dive into here. That's something that we haven't entirely covered. That is more professional features. So if you are used to using top-end cameras and you really want to dive into the white balance of an image, you really want to dive into a variety of different elements, you can do that with this. That's something that's not always available on other flagship phones, and that's one of the main selling points for Sony here. There's also a similar thing now for video as well. So you can record in 4K, you can record in a variety of different resolutions. But if you want to, you can dive in with a pro video app as well.
I've used Sony phones in the past, the premium ones with 4K video recording, and they have struggled to record at 4K. In the past, they'd overheat and they'd stop after a few minutes and basically crash. Have you found the same with this device?
No, I haven't found the same with this device. I haven't been recording for long lengths of time generally. I've been recording for shorter lengths, so maybe that is something that would happen eventually, but I've not come across any issues like that.
Okay, that's positive to hear that maybe Sony has addressed that issue then going forward, because that was something that has plagued a number of their previous flagships. So that is all good. And in terms of the images you're getting out of this phone, were you impressed?
Yes, I was impressed. You're getting true to life images here, really, compared to what you get out of an iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy, where they're usually the saturation is a little bit up and it's trying to make the image pop a little bit more. You're not going to get that sort of thing by default from the Sony camera. You're going to get a much more true to life image, which photographers are probably going to want in that situation. And then if you really want to make your images pop, you can start doing that in editing, or you can bring that through with the pro features.
And it's also worth considering that Sony's using its own sensors, obviously, in the back of this phone, but a lot of other manufacturers use Sony camera sensors in their devices, which just goes to show just how good Sony are at producing these cameras. So you should be able to get a decent quality picture out of the Sony phone, considering it's a popular choice for others.
Yeah, you think so? Sony phones in the past haven't always been brilliant at their auto mode, and I think they are trying to address that with the Xperia 1, 2. Autofocus is a really big thing that they've been trying to sort out on their phones, which, from my experience, has been one of the elements that's made it difficult to use Sony cameras in the past, Sony phone cameras, and I think that's addressed that in that way. But as I say, you may not see an image from a Sony phone and think that that is the more exciting image. If you're comparing it to a Galaxy S20 or comparing it to an iPhone 11, you may think those photos are a little bit more exciting, but I do think that Sony is giving you that slightly more true to life aspect.
Excellent, cool. Let's move on. Let's take a look under the hood and take a look at that power. It's a flagship smartphone that's being pitched at, and especially at its price point. Is it backed up with performance?
It is. I got some genuinely good benchmarking scores out of this, and I didn't come across any issues when I was using the phone. There was no stuttering. There was no apps that took ages to load. It's a Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 processor, which is something we've seen in pretty much all flagship Android phones. in 2020, and that's backed up with 8 GB of RAM, which I found to be absolutely perfect, really, even for mobile gaming and everything. You also get 256 GB of storage as a default. There is no other option in this phone, and you've also got micro SD support on top of that as well. I think that's an interesting addition there as well, that you're not getting 128 GB, and Sony's starting to realize that if you are a person that's going to be recording lots of video and taking lots of photos and putting loads of Netflix films onto their phone, you're going to need a little bit more storage than that. The other big upgrade here is this is the first 5G phone from Sony. This is a little bit more complicated. I think at the moment it is only sub-6 technology for 5G. So that means if you're in the US, you'll be restricted to some markets, but Sony hasn't been entirely clear on that yet. That is something I'm trying to get an answer out of them for at the moment. But I've not had the opportunity to test the 5G functionality myself, owing to lockdown and the reason that we're not sat on a sofa together making this video. But yeah, Sony assures us that it's going to give you next-gen connectivity speeds.
Excellent. So it should be relatively future-proof. There's more than enough processing power and RAM and storage. 256 is going to be more than enough for everyone. Generally, these days on flagship phones, you're looking at the operating system taking up between 15 and 20 gigs. So you've still got comfortably over 200 gigs to play with here. And as 5G continues to roll out, then it's going to become more useful. We know that it is slowly rolling out in major cities in the UK, such as London. I read an article the other day that T-Mobile has some form of 5G in 50 states in the US now as well. So it's getting there. There are obviously small pockets of 5G at the moment, but it is coming and it is being rolled out. And sort of by the end of the year, middle of next year, middle of 2021, we're talking, then 5G should be much more prolific in terms of its coverage, and you should start to see the benefits of having this technology. At the moment, it's very much okay, I'm future-proof. Whereas, in a year's time, you should be able to take advantage more of those high quality speeds. Next up, an important one for anyone buying any sort of smartphone, and that is battery life.
Sure. Sony phones haven't always been brilliant at battery life. I think you probably agree with that, John. This time there is a slightly bigger battery in the Sony Xperia 1 II, so that is a 4,000 milliamp battery. Considering that's powering a 4K screen, didn't really think that would perform particularly well, but I've genuinely found the battery life to be good on this phone. I found that it will last a full day of average usage. If you are going to be watching lots of films on this device and you're going to be playing lots of games, you're probably not going to make that full day, but I don't think you would on any flagship. I know for a fact you wouldn't really make that on a normal flagship phone anyway. But yeah, battery life is a little bit better on this compared to previous Sony phones. The other big upgrade that they brought in here is wireless charging. That's something that was on the Sony Xperia XZ3, but then got dropped for the Sony Xperia 1, and then it's made a comeback for the Sony Xperia 1 II. I think that's just the proliferation of wireless charging now, is just all flagship phones have that as a feature, and Sony probably realized, that is something we need to have if we're going to call this a flagship phone. And then there's also fast charging features as well. And then they've also got a extra feature that Sony brought in, where it's protecting your battery essentially. So it will monitor the sort of time you're going to wake up on an average day, and only start to recharge your phone at that time, at a time that would make it appropriate for when you get up. Hopefully the aim behind that is that it should protect your battery for a little bit longer, and you should be able to use this phone for a longer amount of time. We haven't obviously been able to test that in practice, but so far I found the battery life to be really good on the Sony. It's not going to last you 2 days, but it will last you a solid day. And if you're consuming a lot of media and you're playing a lot of video games and stuff, it will go down quicker, but it's the equivalent of other flagship phones right now.
And that's all good. So we can see that the Xperia 1 Mark II, that name, apart from the name being clunky, packed full of great features, performs pretty well, decent battery life, decent cameras, enough power, a lovely 4K screen, even though it may be a little cumbersome at times. So that all sounds good, and you can buy it now if you're tempted, but you are going to have to fork out for all this good stuff. So James, how much is it, and is it worth it?
And just to correct you on that, you can pre-order it now, but it still isn't available until June 18th in the UK, and then some point in July in the US. So that is a complication there. And it is a very expensive phone. So this is $1,200 in the US and £1,100 in the UK. That is I think I'm right in saying that's $250 extra or £250 extra than the Sony Xperia 1. That is a big markup here. Obviously, this is a 5G phone, so we're expecting a little bit of an increase in price, but we've seen some of the other competitors not increase price to that extent. But you are spending a similar amount of money on this phone to, say, an iPhone 11 Pro Max or something like that, which is quite a tough sell, I think, for a lot of people. The price is one of the main elements that I put against this phone. It isn't as expensive as, say, a Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra, which is that kind of top end phone or affordable phone like Galaxy Fold 2 or a Motorola Razr, but it is still a lot of money. You're talking over £1,000, well over $1,000. That's a tough sell for a lot of people, I think.
So what phones should people consider alongside the Mark II? Are there particular ones that it's really going head to head with?
Sure. I think they are trying to go head to head with the Galaxy S20. They're trying to go head to head with the OnePlus 8 Pro and the iPhone 11 Pro in that way. They're trying to offer a lot of the flagship features that those devices offer. So we're talking the real cream of the crop, essentially. I think this is probably more equivalent to the Galaxy S20 and the Galaxy S20 Plus rather than the Ultra. You're not getting that telephoto camera and those slightly extra features that the Ultra is trying to offer there. And obviously, you're spending a little bit more on to get there. I think that's $200 more to be able to get that phone. But yeah, they're trying to combat those best phones, essentially. There's just those few little features on this that drag it down a little bit. I think it's a cumbersome phone for people to use. The 21:9 aspect ratio will be useful for some people, but I think for others, it just makes the phone a little bit too impractical in that way. And the price is just extortionate, really, for what you are getting here. But then again, mobile phones are increasing in that price, and if you're paying for this over 2 years or over 3 years, you may be happy to spend that amount of money on this.
Yeah, you are getting, as we said, something like flagship with plenty of features. It's not like you're being shortchanged in that extent, but there could be handsets that offer similar amount for a bit less. So you're really going to have to weigh that up. Who should consider this phone?
Who should consider this phone? I think Sony's right that if you're a big fan of Sony cameras and you are a budding photographer in that way, you definitely should consider this phone. I also think if you are that kind of person that spends hours and hours a day watching video and playing video games on their phone, this is a perfect option for you as well. I know, John, for example, I know you spend a lot of time watching films on a commute, for example. If you're that type of person, or TV shows on a commute, I think if you're that type of person, you should be considering this in that way. But again, take what I've said into account, that it is a cumbersome phone to use in everyday life. So if you're going to be using it for a variety of other apps that aren't video based or where you're using two hands, just bear that in mind. And I think read our full review, and I think that kind of sums it up in that way.
Excellent. Well, that's great. Thank you very much, James. If you've got any other questions or thoughts or feelings, go and take a look at our full review on the website. Apart from that, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for joining us, James. Thank you for imparting your knowledge, and we'll be back again very soon with another video on Tech Radar.